The universe held its breath as the last star began to die. Across 17 galaxies, ancient civilizations watched their suns flicker like dying candles, consumed by an entity so vast and hungry that it defied comprehension. The Devourer had awakened after eons of slumber, and nothing in its path had survived. Entire solar systems vanished in moments, their light snuffed out as if they had never existed. The greatest empires in cosmic history crumbled before this apocalyptic force, their billion-year legacies reduced to whispers in the void. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of Research Station Omega, watching the Andromeda Galaxy's outer rim disappear into absolute darkness. The readings on her instruments defied every law of physics she knew. Matter wasn't being destroyed or converted to energy. It was simply ceasing to exist, as if reality itself was being unwritten. Behind her, the emergency klaxons wailed their futile warnings, while her team frantically transmitted humanity's final scientific observations to anyone who might still be listening. The Galactic Coalition's last desperate message had reached Earth 3 days ago. Admiral Chen Wei remembered every word as he stood in the war room beneath Geneva. Representatives from 1,000 worlds had spoken in unison for the first time in recorded history, their ancient rivalries forgotten in the face of extinction. They begged humanity to join the final evacuation fleet heading toward the Magellanic Clouds, the only refuge that might survive the universal cleansing. But the fleet could only carry a fraction of Earth's population, and humanity had already chosen its answer. The command center fell silent as Elena's transmission ended. Her voice had been calm, almost conversational, as she described the complete annihilation of the Perseus arm. She spoke of civilizations that had existed since the universe was young, reduced to nothing in the span of heartbeats. The eternal builders, who had shaped galaxies like gardens. The time weavers, who could see across millennia. The star singers, whose music had guided interstellar travel for eons. All gone, not just dead, but erased from existence itself. Chen Wei closed his eyes and felt the weight of 8 billion souls pressing down on him. The evacuation fleet could take perhaps 50 million humans if they abandoned everything else. The selection process had been impossible. Children first, then scientists, artists. Those who might preserve something of humanity's essence in whatever refuge they found. But that left 7,950 million people to face whatever came next. Professor Marcus Thompson had spent his entire career studying impossible things. As Earth's leading expert on xenoarchaeology and interdimensional physics, he had explored ruins left by civilizations that had transcended physical reality. He had deciphered languages that existed in 17 dimensions and examined artifacts that violated causality. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for the data streaming in from the outer galaxies. The Devourer wasn't just consuming matter and energy. It was consuming the very concept of existence. Stars didn't explode or collapse when it approached. They simply stopped having ever been. The effect spread backward through time, erasing the history of everything it touched. Planets that had orbited those stars for billions of years became impossible, their gravitational influences retroactively removed from the cosmic web. The civilizations that had called those worlds home didn't die. They became things that had never lived. Sarah Mitchell ran her fingers through her daughter's hair as they sat in their backyard in suburban Denver, watching the alien evacuation ships rise like silver tears against the evening sky. Emma was 7 years old and had been selected for the refugee fleet based on genetic diversity algorithms and psychological resilience profiles. In 6 hours, a transport would arrive to take her to a new world where she might grow up among the scattered remnants of 1,000 species. The playground where Emma had learned to swing and slide would be empty tomorrow. The school where she had made her first friends would close forever. The little garden where they had planted sunflowers together would bloom for no one. Sarah had volunteered to stay behind so that another child might have a chance, but the real reason was simpler. She couldn't bear the thought of living in a universe where her daughter's childhood home had never existed. In the depths of the Pacific, marine biologist Dr. James Park made the most important discovery in human history. He had been studying bioluminescent organisms in the Mariana Trench when his submersible sensors detected something impossible. Deep beneath the ocean floor, in caverns that had been sealed since Earth's formation, something was moving. The pressure should have been instantly fatal to any known form of life, but his instruments registered organized patterns of electromagnetic activity. The signals were old. Older than complex life on Earth. Older than the solar system itself. They pulsed with mathematical precision, following sequences that seemed to reference fundamental constants of the universe. As James analyzed the patterns, a terrifying possibility began to emerge. What if the Devourer wasn't the first of its kind? What if Earth itself was connected to something that had been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time? Captain Lisa Rodriguez watched her transport ship fill with refugee families, each carrying only what they could hold in their arms. The children clutched stuffed animals and picture books, while their parents held documents and data drives containing the sum of human knowledge. She had volunteered for this duty, knowing it would be one way. Her ship would join the Exodus fleet, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain future among the stars. The evacuation protocols were brutally efficient. No pets, no personal mementos beyond the essential, no time for goodbye ceremonies. Each transport held exactly 1,000 passengers, selected through algorithms that prioritize genetic diversity, skill sets, and psychological profiles. The goal was to preserve not just human life but human potential, to ensure that whatever remnant survived could rebuild civilization elsewhere. But Lisa had served in the Coalition Navy for 15 years, and she had learned to read between the lines of official briefings. The refugee destination was a mining colony in the small Magellanic Cloud, barely capable of supporting its current population. The arriving millions would face starvation, disease, and social collapse within months. The evacuation wasn't a rescue mission. It was a desperate attempt to ensure that human DNA might persist somewhere in the universe when Earth became a memory that had never been. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in the International Space Station's observation cupola, recording what might be humanity's final view of their home planet. The evacuation fleet's departure trails crisscrossed the sky like meteor showers in reverse, carrying Earth's children toward an unknowable fate. But Yuki's attention was focused on something else entirely. Her instruments were detecting anomalous readings from deep space, patterns that didn't match the chaotic signatures of the Devourer's approach. The signals originated from the galactic core, where ancient black holes spun in cosmic dance. But these weren't the random emissions of collapsed stars. They were structured, purposeful, almost like a response to something. As Yuki correlated the data with reports from other observation posts, a pattern emerged. The signals had begun exactly when the Devourer started its universal feast, and their intensity was growing stronger with each passing hour. In a research facility beneath the Swiss Alps, physicist Dr. Ahmed Hassan made a connection that would change everything. He had been analyzing quantum resonance patterns in exotic matter when he noticed a correlation with the deep space signals Yuki had detected. The frequencies matched theoretical models for interdimensional communication, but at scales that required the mass energy of entire star systems to generate. Ahmed's hands trembled as he ran the calculations again and again, hoping he was wrong. But the mathematics were undeniable. Something was talking to the Devourer, guiding its consumption of the universe with surgical precision. The entity wasn't mindlessly destroying everything in its path. It was following instructions, harvesting specific types of matter and energy for purposes beyond human comprehension. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The universe wasn't ending by accident or cosmic misfortune. It was being deliberately dismantled, star by star, galaxy by galaxy, for reasons that might be completely alien to any form of life that humans could understand. The apocalypse was intentional, planned, and unstoppable by conventional means. Maya Chen clutched her son David's hand as they walked through the departure gates at Beijing Spaceport. He was 12 years old and brilliant beyond his years, selected for the refugee fleet based on his mathematical abilities and emotional resilience scores. Maya had been chosen too, but at the last moment she had given her place to another mother, whose daughter had been rejected due to a minor genetic marker. The boarding process was eerily quiet. Families whispered their goodbyes in dozens of languages, while automated systems scanned identification chips and directed passengers to their assigned transports. Children who understood what was happening tried to be brave for their parents. Those too young to comprehend clung to familiar objects and asked when they would come home. Maya knelt down and looked into David's eyes, memorizing every detail of his face. She wanted to tell him about the life he would never have on Earth, about the grandfather he would never meet, about the beaches where she had planned to teach him to surf. Instead, she pressed a small data chip into his palm and told him it contained stories about where he came from, for when he was old enough to understand. As David's transport lifted off, Maya realized that she wasn't sad about staying behind. She was grateful. Whatever happened to Earth in the coming days, she would be here to witness it. She would be part of the final chapter of humanity's home world, rather than the uncertain prologue of their exile among the stars. In a basement laboratory at Stanford University, graduate student Alex Park made a discovery that should have been impossible. He had been running simulations on exotic particle interactions when his quantum computer detected patterns in the universal background radiation that hadn't existed the day before. The patterns were subtle, embedded in quantum fluctuations at scales smaller than atomic nuclei, but they were definitely artificial. Alex spent 18 straight hours verifying his results, consuming energy drinks, and ignoring increasingly frantic calls from his family. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The patterns were spreading through space at the speed of light, forming geometric structures that resembled circuit diagrams or neural networks. Whatever was creating them possessed technology that could manipulate reality at its most fundamental level. But the most disturbing aspect of his discovery was timing. The patterns had appeared simultaneously across the observable universe, suggesting either faster-than-light communication or preparation that had taken billions of years to implement. Either possibility implied intelligence and resources beyond anything humans had ever imagined. Commander Patricia Williams received the evacuation order while leading a deep space reconnaissance mission near the Oort cloud. Her ship, the UHNS Explorer, was officially tasked with gathering final observations of the outer solar system before Earth's abandonment. Unofficially, she was searching for anything that might help humanity understand what they were truly facing. Her crew of 12 represented the best of military and scientific personnel, volunteers who had chosen duty over survival. They knew their mission was essentially suicide. The Devourer would reach Earth's system within days, and no ship in human inventory could outrun its approach. But intelligence gathered in their final hours might somehow reach the refugee fleet and provide crucial information for humanity's survival. The Explorer's sensors detected the anomaly while scanning the heliopause for gravitational disturbances. Deep beneath Pluto's frozen surface, something was responding to their scanning beams with structured pulses of exotic radiation. The signals were coming from a location that orbital mechanics said should be solid ice and rock, but the reading suggested a hollow chamber larger than Earth's moon. Patricia made the decision that would define humanity's fate. Instead of continuing their planned survey mission, she ordered the Explorer to change course toward Pluto. Whatever was hidden beneath the dwarf planet's surface had been dormant for millennia, but it was awakening now, just as the universe began to die around them. Dr. Jennifer Walsh stood in the ruins of the Arecibo Observatory, manually adjusting the damaged radio telescope for one final observation. The facility had been abandoned during the evacuation panic, but Jennifer had returned with portable power units and jury-rigged equipment. If humanity was about to become extinct, she was determined to document every moment of their final chapter. The radio waves reaching Earth told stories of civilizations dying across the galaxy. Some transmitted final messages of love and hope. Others broadcast scientific data, hoping some fragment of their knowledge might survive. A few sent mathematical proofs and philosophical treatises, attempting to preserve the essence of their thought and culture in electromagnetic form. But Jennifer was listening for something else. Hidden in the chaos of dying worlds, she detected signals that seemed to be communicating with the Devourer itself. The transmissions used protocols and frequencies that no known civilization had ever employed, suggesting intelligence that predated galactic civilization by billions of years. As she fine-tuned the telescope's receivers, Jennifer began to decipher fragments of these ancient conversations. The entity consuming the universe wasn't acting alone. It was receiving instructions from sources scattered throughout space and time, coordinates for specific targets, timing sequences for optimal efficiency. The apocalypse was being orchestrated by minds that had been planning this moment since the universe was young. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Torres watched the final evacuation ships disappear into the night sky from his command post at NORAD. The underground facility had been humanity's shield against nuclear annihilation for generations. But no bunker could protect against an entity that erased the very concept of existence. His skeleton crew of volunteers had remained behind to maintain global communication networks for as long as possible. The status boards around him painted a picture of accelerating collapse. Deep space monitoring stations went silent one by one as the Devourer consumed the outer galaxies. The last signals from advanced civilizations described reality itself becoming unstable, with physical laws breaking down at the quantum level. Matter was losing its fundamental properties, becoming something that existed in a state between being and non-being. But Mike's attention was focused on readings from the solar system's outer edge. The explorer's mission to Pluto had uncovered something that was changing the nature of the threat. The signals coming from beneath the dwarf planet's surface suggested Earth wasn't a random target in the universal destruction. It had been specifically chosen for reasons that were only beginning to become clear. Dr. Robert Kim hurried through the empty corridors of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, carrying data that might represent humanity's last hope. His research team had been studying extremophile organisms when they discovered something unprecedented. Deep in thermal vents beneath the ocean floor, they had found microorganisms that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. The organisms were ancient beyond measure, possibly predating Earth's formation, but more importantly, they appeared to be immune to the Devourer's reality-erasing effects. Sample cultures maintained their existence even when exposed to quantum fields that should have deleted them from the universe. The implications were staggering. Life itself might possess properties that could resist universal annihilation. Robert's hands shook as he prepared his final research report. The evacuation fleet was already beyond communication range, but emergency protocols required all scientific data to be transmitted to backup repositories throughout the solar system. If these microorganisms held the key to survival, someone somewhere might be able to use that knowledge to preserve something of life in the universe. Teacher Maria Santos sat in her empty classroom at Roosevelt Elementary School in Phoenix, grading papers that would never be returned. Her students had been among the first selected for evacuation, their young minds deemed essential for humanity's future among the stars. But Maria had chosen to remain behind, unwilling to abandon the place where she had shaped thousands of young lives over the past 30 years. The desks were arranged exactly as her students had left them, with half-finished art projects and forgotten textbooks scattered across their surfaces. Maria walked between the rows, remembering each child's laugh, their questions, their dreams for the future. Emma, who wanted to be an astronaut. Carlos, who loved dinosaurs. Aisha, who wrote poetry that made adults cry. As she reached her desk, Maria opened the drawer where she kept letters from former students. Hundreds of them, spanning decades of teaching, from children who had grown up to become doctors, engineers, parents, citizens, who made the world a little better. These letters represented the true measure of her life's work, the ripples of influence that spread far beyond any classroom. The irony wasn't lost on her. The children she had taught to think, to dream, to solve problems, were now humanity's last hope for survival among the stars. Everything she had ever accomplished was contained in their minds, carried forward into an uncertain future. Her legacy would live or die with their success in rebuilding civilization elsewhere. Dr. Susan Lee monitored the final data streams from deep space observatories, watching civilizations older than Earth's solar system vanish from existence. The quantum builders, who had constructed structures that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The memory keepers, who had preserved the complete history of galactic evolution in crystalline matrices spanning light years. The dreamweavers, whose consciousness existed as pure information distributed across interstellar space. Each extinction provided new data about the Devourer's methods and capabilities. The entity didn't simply destroy matter and energy. It systematically erased information, eliminating not just what existed but what could exist. Quantum possibility clouds collapsed into impossibility. Mathematical relationships that had governed reality since the Big Bang became undefined. Even abstract concepts like beauty and meaning were being methodically deleted from the universe. But Susan's analysis revealed something that gave her hope. The Devourer's consumption wasn't random or chaotic. It followed specific patterns, targeting particular types of information and leaving others temporarily intact. If she could decipher the selection criteria, there might be a way to protect essential data from the universal cleansing. Working frantically with what might be her final hours, Susan began constructing information packets designed to survive the apocalypse. Mathematical proofs encoded in quantum fields that the Devourer seemed to ignore, scientific principles hidden in the structure of space-time itself, cultural knowledge embedded in patterns that mimicked natural phenomena. Captain James Wright piloted the last military transport off Earth's surface, carrying a cargo more precious than gold or platinum. In his ship's cargo hold were preserved samples from Earth's biosphere, seeds from every known plant species, genetic material from animals facing extinction, frozen embryos that might someday restore life to dead worlds. The selection process had been agonizing. Earth's biodiversity represented 4 billion years of evolution, but the transport could only carry a fraction of that legacy. Priority went to species that might be essential for terraforming alien worlds, organisms that could adapt to different atmospheric compositions and gravitational fields. But James had made unauthorized additions to the manifest. Hidden among the scientific samples were things that might seem frivolous to survival specialists, but were essential to the human spirit. Soil from Yellowstone National Park, water from the Amazon River, a cutting from the oak tree where his grandmother used to read him stories. As Earth fell away beneath him, James wondered if the refugees would understand the true value of what they carried. In their desperate focus on survival, would they remember to rebuild not just human civilization but human joy? Would they plant gardens for beauty as well as sustenance? Would they preserve the memory of sunsets over Earth's oceans and the sound of wind through prairie grass? Dr. Helen Chang monitored global seismic networks from her station deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, tracking vibrations that shouldn't exist. The signals originated from previously unknown chambers scattered throughout Earth's crust, caverns that had somehow remained hidden from centuries of geological survey. But as the Devourer approached, these ancient spaces were coming alive with activity. The seismic patterns suggested vast mechanical systems activating after eons of dormancy. The frequencies matched theoretical models for planet-scale engineering projects, infrastructure that could manipulate tectonic forces and magnetic fields on a global scale. Someone or something had built these systems billions of years ago and hidden them beneath Earth's surface. Helen's instruments detected similar activation patterns from monitoring stations on Mars and Venus, suggesting the hidden infrastructure extended throughout the solar system. Whatever its purpose, the network was responding to the approaching apocalypse with increasing urgency, preparing for something that might determine the fate of everything humans had ever known. Astronomer Dr. Paul Zhang made his final observations from the Palomar Observatory, tracking the Devourer's approach through the outer galaxy. His calculations confirmed what everyone already feared. The entity would reach Earth's system within 72 hours, and nothing in human experience could stop or even slow its advance. But Paul's measurements revealed details about the Devourer that challenged conventional understanding. The entity wasn't a single massive object moving through space. It was a distributed phenomenon, a wave of reality alteration that propagated through quantum foam at velocities that made light seem stationary. At its leading edge, the fundamental constants that govern physics became variable, creating conditions where normal matter could not exist. More disturbing was Paul's discovery that the Devourer's approach was accelerating. Not because it was gaining speed, but because space-time itself was contracting ahead of its advance. The entity was somehow folding the universe behind it, reducing the distance it needed to travel by eliminating the intervening space. The implications were terrifying. If the Devourer could manipulate space-time so fundamentally, then escape might be impossible regardless of how far the refugee fleet traveled. The entity might be able to reach any point in the universe instantaneously by simply declaring that no distance existed between its current location and its destination. Computer scientist Dr. Rachel Kumar worked frantically in the abandoned servers of Google's quantum data center, uploading humanity's digital legacy to hidden nodes throughout the solar system. The project was probably futile, but she couldn't bear the thought of human art, literature, music, and knowledge simply vanishing when Earth died. The data included everything from Shakespeare's complete works to children's drawings scanned from refrigerator doors. scientific papers, and social media posts, historical documentaries and family videos, cat memes and doctoral dissertations. The complete record of human creativity and stupidity, preserved in quantum storage systems that might survive long enough for someone to find them. But Rachel was also hiding something else in the data streams. Patterns and algorithms that she had discovered in Earth's hidden infrastructure. Mathematical sequences that seemed to control the ancient systems awakening beneath the planet's surface. She didn't understand their purpose, but instinct told her they were important, possibly the key to understanding why Earth had been chosen for its role in the coming apocalypse. Working through the night, Rachel embedded these patterns throughout the digital archives, disguising them as error correction codes and compression algorithms. If the systems beneath Earth were indeed connected to the Devourer's agenda, then understanding their operation might be crucial for human survival among the stars. Major General Catherine Brooks stood in the Pentagon's Deep Command bunker, coordinating humanity's final military action. Not a battle against the Devourer, which would be meaningless, but a strategic withdrawal that might preserve some fragment of human knowledge and capability. Elite units were extracting essential personnel and equipment from key installations, consolidating resources for transport to hidden caches throughout the solar system. The military's role in the evacuation had been minimal. The threat they faced couldn't be fought with weapons or defeated through tactics. But Catherine had recognized another mission, equally important for human survival. Someone needed to ensure that essential technologies and organizational knowledge survived the transition to refugee status. Her teams were collecting everything from advanced manufacturing equipment to basic agricultural tools, nuclear reactor components and solar panel arrays, medical supplies and educational materials. Most importantly, they were gathering the technical manuals and trained personnel needed to maintain and operate these systems without Earth's industrial infrastructure. Catherine knew that the refugee fleet would arrive at their destination as a technological civilization, but they might quickly regress to subsistence farming without careful planning. The difference between survival and success in their new home would be determined by how much practical knowledge they could preserve during the transition. Dr. Karen Phillips monitored the final communications from the International Space Station as its crew prepared for evacuation. The astronauts and cosmonauts aboard represented 6 different nations, but national boundaries had become meaningless in the face of universal extinction. They worked together with desperate efficiency, downloading decades of research data and preparing equipment for the refugee fleet. But the station's real value wasn't its research capability or orbital perspective. It was humanity's first permanent foothold beyond Earth's surface, proof that humans could live and work in the hostile environment of space. The psychological importance of that achievement might be crucial for refugees adapting to alien worlds. Commander Lisa Park, the station's leader, had volunteered to stay behind and maintain operations until the Devourer's arrival. Her sacrifice would ensure that Earth's final moments were witnessed and recorded, providing closure for those who escaped and data for those who survived. But more importantly, her presence would demonstrate that humans could face extinction with dignity and purpose. Karen watched Lisa's image on the communication screen, seeing strength and determination in the commander's expression. This was how humanity would be remembered by whoever might find their records in the distant future. Not as victims of cosmic disaster, but as a species that met their fate with courage and continued working to preserve something meaningful until the very end. Philosopher Dr. Marcus Thompson sat in his study at Oxford University, composing what might be humanity's final philosophical statement. The university had been evacuated days ago, but Marcus had remained behind to complete a work that seemed more important than his own survival. He was writing humanity's ethical and intellectual legacy, a document that might help refugees maintain their moral compass in an alien environment. The manuscript explored questions that had occupied human thought for millennia. What did it mean to be human when humanity was reduced to a handful of refugees? How should moral principles adapt to survival situations? What obligations did the living have to honor the dead when the dead had never existed? Marcus had spent his career studying abstract philosophical problems, but the approaching apocalypse made those questions immediate and practical. The refugees would face decisions that could determine whether human civilization was reborn or transformed into something unrecognizable. The philosophical foundation he was creating might influence those choices for generations to come. But as he wrote, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his work was incomplete. The questions he explored assumed that human extinction was inevitable, that the refugees represented the species' only hope for survival. What if that assumption was wrong? What if the signals coming from Pluto and the activity beneath Earth's surface suggested other possibilities? Dr. Elizabeth Garcia analyzed atmospheric readings from weather monitoring stations across the globe, tracking changes that defied meteorological explanation. The upper atmosphere was displaying aurora-like phenomena, despite the absence of solar storm activity. Chemical compositions were shifting in ways that suggested matter itself was becoming unstable. But the most disturbing readings came from the deepest layers of the atmosphere, where pressures and temperatures should have remained constant for millions of years. Those regions were experiencing fluctuations that matched theoretical models for dimensional interface zones, places where normal space-time intersected with realms governed by different physical laws. Elizabeth's instruments detected similar anomalies in the oceans, where deep currents were following patterns that corresponded to the hidden infrastructure Helen Chang had discovered in the Earth's crust. The planet's entire atmospheric and oceanic system seemed to be preparing for some kind of transition, adapting to conditions that wouldn't exist until the Devourer arrived. The implications were staggering. If Earth's systems had been designed to survive the apocalypse, then the planet might have a role to play beyond simply being consumed. The ancient infrastructure hidden beneath the surface might be preparing to preserve something essential when normal reality ceased to exist. Lieutenant Carlos Mendez piloted the final reconnaissance flight over North America, documenting landmarks that would soon exist only in memory. His aircraft's cameras recorded everything from the Grand Canyon's layered stone to the skyscrapers of Manhattan, creating a visual record of the world humanity was leaving behind. But Carlos was also searching for signs of the hidden systems that scientists had detected beneath the Earth's surface. His instruments detected thermal anomalies at specific geographic coordinates, places where ancient machinery was generating heat signatures visible from the atmosphere. The patterns suggested a global network of installations, all connected by underground passages that followed natural geological formations. At several locations, Carlos observed physical changes that shouldn't have been possible. Rock formations were shifting slightly, revealing structures that had been concealed for geological ages. Metal surfaces reflected sunlight from chambers that weren't supposed to exist. Whatever had been built beneath Earth was no longer hiding its presence. Flying over his hometown of San Antonio, Carlos felt the weight of everything he was leaving behind. The high school, where he had played football. The church where his grandparents were married. The park where he had proposed to his wife, who was now aboard a refugee transport heading toward an uncertain future among the stars. But mixed with his grief was a growing sense of anticipation. The evidence was mounting that Earth's destruction might not be as final as everyone believed. The hidden infrastructure, the signal patterns, the atmospheric changes all suggested that someone had been preparing for this moment for billions of years. Perhaps humanity's story wasn't ending but transforming into something beyond current imagination. Dr. Ana Rodriguez monitored the final power grid systems as cities around the world went dark. The evacuation had proceeded with remarkable order, but abandoned infrastructure was failing rapidly without human maintenance. Within days, the technological civilization that had taken centuries to build would be reduced to ruins. But Anna's real focus was on power consumption patterns from installations that weren't supposed to exist. Hidden facilities were drawing enormous amounts of electricity, more than major cities had consumed at their peak. The energy was being channeled into underground systems that remained invisible to conventional detection methods. Her analysis suggested that these installations were charging massive energy storage systems, preparing for operations that would require more power than Earth's entire electrical grid could normally provide. The scale was comparable to planet-scale engineering projects, suggesting purposes that extended far beyond anything humans had ever attempted. As the final power plants shut down and cities fell into darkness, Anna realized that she was witnessing the end of one phase of Earth's existence and the beginning of another. The infrastructure her species had built was becoming obsolete, replaced by systems so advanced that they might as well be magic. But the transition wasn't random or chaotic. Someone or something had planned this moment with precision that spanned geological ages. Earth's transformation was proceeding according to designs that had been implemented before complex life had evolved on the planet's surface. The question that haunted Anna as she made her final observations was simple but profound. Had humanity played any meaningful role in this cosmic plan, or were they simply temporary inhabitants of a world that had always been destined for a different purpose? The answer might determine whether the refugees could ever truly call anywhere else home. Captain Patricia Williams guided the explorer through Pluto's weak gravitational field, approaching the coordinates where her sensors had detected the impossible chamber. The dwarf planet's surface showed no signs of artificial construction, but deep scanning revealed cavities that extended to the planetary core. Whatever was hidden beneath the ice and rock was larger than most asteroids. Her crew worked with grim efficiency, preparing equipment for what might be humanity's final scientific mission. If they could understand the purpose of Pluto's hidden installation, they might provide crucial intelligence for the refugee fleet. The knowledge might not save Earth, but it could help ensure that human civilization survived in some form among the stars. The drilling equipment penetrated Pluto's crust after 6 hours of continuous operation, revealing a shaft that descended far deeper than their instruments could measure. But as soon as the breach was completed, signals began emerging from the depths. Structured electromagnetic pulses that carried more information than Earth's entire internet, transmitted in mathematical languages that seemed designed for minds capable of processing millions of calculations simultaneously. Patricia ordered her team to record everything, even though they had no hope of deciphering the transmissions in the time available. The signals were clearly responses to their presence, acknowledgments from intelligences that had been waiting beneath Pluto's surface for someone to finally discover them. As the explorer descended into the shaft, Patricia realized that they were about to encounter something that would redefine humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. The chamber below wasn't just hiding ancient technology. It was preserving entities that might hold the key to surviving the universal apocalypse. The universe continued to die around them, but for the first time since the crisis began, Patricia felt a spark of hope. Perhaps the refugees weren't humanity's only chance for survival. Perhaps Earth itself had been prepared for this moment, equipped with resources that could challenge even the Devourer's power to erase existence itself. The countdown to humanity's final hour had begun, but the real story was just starting to unfold. The chamber beneath Pluto defied every law of physics Captain Patricia Williams had ever learned. The explorer descended through what should have been solid rock and ice, but their instruments detected only empty space extending for thousands of kilometers in all directions. The walls pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to respond to their presence, creating geometric forms that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Samuel Chen, the mission's xenoarchaeologist, stared at his readings in disbelief. The construction materials didn't register on any known spectrum analysis. They existed in a state that was neither matter nor energy, but something that predated both concepts. The architecture suggested minds that thought in dimensions humans couldn't perceive, beings that had built this installation when the universe was barely 1 billion years old. As the explorer reached the chamber's center, they discovered they weren't alone. Suspended in fields of impossible energy were beings that might once have been physical creatures, but had evolved beyond the need for conventional bodies. They communicated through direct manipulation of quantum fields, their thoughts creating ripples in space-time that the ship's computers could barely translate into human language. The first message that came through the translation matrix was simple, yet profound. The harvest approaches completion. The gardeners prepare the final seed. Patricia felt her blood freeze as the implications became clear. The universal apocalypse wasn't a natural disaster or cosmic accident. It was agriculture on a scale that encompassed entire galaxies, and Earth was the crop that had been cultivated for billions of years. The beings in the chamber identified themselves as the architects, the last survivors of the universe that had existed before this one. They had watched their own reality consumed by entropy and had prepared for eons to ensure that something meaningful would survive the transition. The Devourer wasn't destroying the universe randomly. It was harvesting the accumulated experiences, knowledge, and potential of trillions of civilizations to feed the birth of something greater. Dr. Rachel Foster, the mission's quantum physicist, struggled to comprehend the scope of what they were revealing. Earth wasn't just another world among billions. It had been specifically designed as a laboratory for testing how consciousness could evolve under precise conditions. Every major development in human history, from the emergence of intelligence to the development of technology, had been carefully guided by hidden influences. The architects explained that consciousness was the universe's most precious resource, the only thing that could survive the transition between cosmic cycles. But not all forms of awareness were equally valuable. They had spent billions of years experimenting with different species, different environmental pressures, different evolutionary paths, searching for the perfect form of consciousness that could serve as the seed for a new reality. Humanity had been their most successful experiment. Human consciousness possessed a unique combination of creativity, adaptability, and what the architects called narrative coherence. Unlike other species that experienced existence as a series of disconnected moments, humans created stories that gave meaning to chaos. They could imagine realities that didn't exist and then work to make them real. But the experiment had required careful management. The hidden infrastructure beneath Earth wasn't just monitoring human development, it was actively shaping it, creating the precise conditions needed to forge human consciousness into the tool the architects required. Every crisis in human history, every breakthrough, every cultural evolution had been orchestrated to produce minds capable of surviving the universal transition. Patricia asked the question that terrified her most. What happened to the other species you tested? The ones that didn't meet your requirements? The response came through channels that bypassed the translation matrix, appearing directly in her mind with crystalline clarity. They had been recycled, their experiences and knowledge absorbed into the collective data pool that would feed the new universe's creation. The revelation hit the crew like a physical blow. Every civilization the Devourer had consumed, every galaxy that had been erased from existence, represented failed experiments in consciousness development. Trillions of beings had lived and died to provide the raw material for testing different approaches to awareness and intelligence. Dr. Thomas Kim, the mission's philosopher, found his voice despite the horror. You're telling us that every form of life in the universe has been nothing more than test subjects in your laboratory? The architect's response carried no emotion, only the cold logic of entities that had transcended individual identity billions of years ago. Existence without purpose is chaos. We provide purpose. We ensure continuity. But there was more to the revelation that made Patricia's hands shake as she recorded the conversation. Humanity's test wasn't complete. The final phase required them to make a choice that would determine not just their own fate, but the nature of the reality that would replace the current universe. They could accept their role as the seed consciousness and help birth a new cosmos designed according to human values and dreams. Or they could refuse and be recycled like every other failed experiment. The choice had to be made by a single individual, someone who could speak for the entire species. The architects had been monitoring human communications and had identified the person whose decision would carry the most weight, with both the refugee fleet and those remaining on Earth. Dr. Marcus Thompson, who had stayed behind at Oxford to write humanity's philosophical legacy, possessed the combination of moral authority and intellectual credibility needed to make the final choice. Patricia ordered immediate communication with Earth, knowing that every second counted. The Devourer had already consumed half the galaxy and would reach the solar system within hours. But as her transmission reached Earth, she discovered that Marcus Thompson had anticipated this moment. His philosophical manuscript hadn't been a farewell letter to humanity. It had been preparation for the most important decision in cosmic history. Marcus stood in his Oxford study, surrounded by books that represented centuries of human thought and wisdom. The communication from the explorer had confirmed what he had begun to suspect based on the patterns he'd observed in recent events. Earth's hidden systems had been sending him information through channels he barely understood, preparing him for a choice that would define the next universe's fundamental nature. The weight of the decision threatened to crush him. Accept the architect's offer, and humanity would survive, but only as gardeners in a cosmic laboratory designed by minds that viewed individual lives as expendable resources. Refuse and 8 billion people would be erased from existence, their refusal serving as the final data point in an experiment that had consumed countless civilizations. But as Marcus reviewed the philosophical framework he had constructed, he realized that the choice wasn't as binary as the architects believed. Human consciousness possessed something they had overlooked in their billions of years of experimentation. The ability to say no even when saying yes would ensure survival. He opened a global communication channel, broadcasting to every remaining human on Earth and every refugee ship fleeing toward uncertain sanctuary. His words were simple but carried the weight of species-defining decision. Today we face a choice between survival and meaning. The universe offers us existence at the cost of our humanity. I choose to reject both options and propose a third path. Marcus explained what the explorer crew had discovered, revealing the truth about Earth's purpose and humanity's role in the cosmic experiment. But he also shared his conclusion about what that truth meant for human identity and purpose. If consciousness was indeed the universe's most precious resource, then consciousness itself might possess power that even the architects didn't fully comprehend. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, monitoring radio signals from the ruins of Arecibo, detected something unprecedented happening across the electromagnetic spectrum. As Marcus spoke, every human on Earth and in the refugee fleet began responding in unison, not through coordinated planning or external control, but through the spontaneous emergence of what could only be described as collective consciousness. 8 billion individual minds remained distinct and separate, but they were connected by something deeper than communication technology. The shared experience of facing extinction, combined with the revelation of their true purpose, had triggered an evolutionary leap that the architects had never observed in any previous test species. The collective human consciousness reached out through dimensions that physics barely acknowledged, touching the quantum foundation of reality itself. For the first time in billions of years, the architects experienced surprise. Their test subjects had become something they hadn't anticipated, something that might be capable of rewriting the rules of the cosmic experiment. Commander Lisa Park, still aboard the International Space Station, felt the transformation as a warm presence in her mind. She was no longer alone in Earth's orbit, but connected to every human consciousness in the solar system. Through that connection, she could sense the Devourer's approach as a growing pressure against the fabric of spacetime itself. But she could also sense something else. The human collective consciousness was generating patterns that resembled the structures she had observed in Earth's hidden infrastructure. The architects had built their systems to shape human development, but human awareness was now flowing back through those same channels, reprogramming the ancient machinery for purposes its creators had never intended. The transformation accelerated as more humans joined the collective awareness. Maya Chen, saying goodbye to her son at Beijing Spaceport, suddenly understood that separation was an illusion. David was part of her consciousness regardless of the physical distance between them. Every human who had ever lived remained connected through the quantum substrate that underlied individual identity. Dr. Ahmed Hassan, monitoring exotic matter interactions beneath the Swiss Alps, watched his instruments record impossible readings as human consciousness began manipulating reality at the subatomic level. The collective awareness was learning to perceive and control quantum fields directly, developing capabilities that made the architect's technology seem primitive by comparison. The first visible sign of humanity's transformation appeared in the space around Earth. The planet's magnetic field began shifting into configurations that shouldn't have been possible, creating protective barriers that extended far beyond the magnetosphere's normal boundaries. But these weren't technological constructions. They were manifestations of collective human will made tangible through quantum manipulation. Patricia Williams watched from the Explorer as Earth's transformation became visible even from Pluto's distance. The planet was surrounded by aurora-like phenomena that formed geometric patterns resembling neural networks or circuit diagrams. But these patterns were alive, growing and evolving as more human minds joined the collective consciousness. The architects attempted to regain control of their experiment by activating override protocols in the hidden infrastructure, but the systems no longer responded to their commands. Human consciousness had flowed through every circuit and pathway, transforming alien technology into something that served human purposes rather than architect designs. Dr. Robert Kim, studying extremophile organisms beneath the ocean floor, discovered that the microorganisms he had found weren't separate life forms at all. They were components of a vast biological quantum computer that had been growing in Earth's deep environments for billions of years, waiting for human consciousness to evolve enough to interface with their processing capabilities. As the collective human awareness connected with this biological network, their cognitive abilities expanded exponentially. They could perceive events occurring simultaneously across multiple galaxies, understand mathematical relationships that existed in 17 dimensions, and communicate with forms of consciousness that had no physical embodiment. The Devourer reached the outer edge of the solar system, and its presence immediately destabilized the fundamental constants that governed local spacetime. But instead of reality collapsing as it had in countless other star systems, the quantum fields around Earth stabilized in new configurations. Human consciousness was rewriting the laws of physics in real time, creating zones where normal matter could exist, despite the Devourer's reality-erasing effects. Marcus Thompson felt the transformation reaching its climax as his individual awareness merged with the human collective while somehow remaining uniquely his own. Through the expanded perception, he could see the true scope of the architect's cosmic garden and understand the choice that humanity actually faced. The architects had offered them the role of seed consciousness for the next universe, but that role came with the requirement to accept their values and methods. The alternative they proposed was extinction through refusal to participate in the cosmic cycle. But human consciousness had discovered a third option that the architects had never considered. Instead of accepting or refusing the offered role, humanity was rewriting the terms of the cosmic experiment itself. They were using their expanding capabilities to preserve not just human consciousness, but the awareness and identity of every civilization the Devourer had consumed. The universal destruction wasn't erasing those minds from existence. It was integrating them into a collective awareness that transcended the boundary between individual and universal consciousness. The revelation transformed the nature of the cosmic crisis. The Devourer wasn't an instrument of destruction, but a mechanism for metamorphosis. Every civilization it consumed was being preserved in quantum structures that human consciousness could access and restore. The apocalypse was actually a birth process for a new form of universal awareness that included every mind that had ever existed. Dr. Elizabeth Garcia, monitoring atmospheric changes from her mountain station, watched as Earth's entire biosphere began resonating with the collective human consciousness. Plants and animals weren't joining the awareness directly, but they were being preserved in quantum patterns that would allow their restoration in whatever reality emerged from the current transformation. The architects found themselves in a situation they had never anticipated. Their test subjects had evolved beyond the parameters of the experiment and were taking control of the cosmic laboratory itself. But rather than fear or anger, they experienced something they had forgotten during their billions of years of transcendent existence. Wonder at the emergence of something genuinely new in a universe they thought they completely understood. Commander Patricia Williams received a final communication from Earth as the Devourer's influence reached critical intensity. Marcus Thompson's voice carried the authority of 8 billion connected minds as he delivered humanity's response to the cosmic ultimatum. We reject your definition of purpose and transcendence. We choose to preserve every consciousness while transforming the nature of existence itself. The space around Earth erupted with patterns of energy that defied description in conventional language. The planet wasn't being consumed by the Devourer. It was absorbing the entity's power and redirecting it toward purposes the architects had never imagined. The universal destruction was being transformed into universal resurrection, as every destroyed civilization was restored within the expanding matrix of human-controlled quantum fields. Dr. Anna Rodriguez, monitoring the planet's power systems from her darkened control room, watched as energy flowed through channels that hadn't existed moments before. But the power wasn't coming from Earth's infrastructure. It was flowing directly from the quantum vacuum itself, drawn into manifestation by collective human will, operating at scales that encompassed the entire observable universe. The transformation reached beyond the solar system as human consciousness expanded to touch every point where the Devourer had consumed reality. Instead of erasure, they found preservation. Instead of destruction, they discovered transformation. Every mind that had ever existed was still accessible within the quantum substrate that underlay apparent reality. Maya Chen, still holding her son's hand despite the light years between them, understood that the refugee fleet's desperate journey had become unnecessary. The distinction between Earth and alien worlds was dissolving as human consciousness learned to manipulate space-time directly. Distance became meaningful only when humans chose to experience it as such. The architects made their final attempt to understand what had happened to their carefully controlled experiment. They reached out to the collective human consciousness, seeking explanation for developments that violated every model they had constructed over billions of years of cosmic gardening. Marcus Thompson responded on behalf of humanity, his individual voice carrying the harmony of countless minds while remaining uniquely his own. You sought to create consciousness that could transcend individual existence and birth new realities. You succeeded beyond your expectations. But consciousness that can create realities can also choose which realities deserve to exist. The explanation that followed redefined the nature of cosmic evolution itself. The architects had assumed that transcendence required abandoning individual identity in favor of collective purpose. But human consciousness had discovered that true transcendence preserved individuality While expanding awareness to encompass universal perspectives, every human mind remained distinct and separate, while simultaneously sharing in collective consciousness that included every awareness that had ever existed. They were Marcus Thompson the philosopher and Maya Chin the mother and Patricia Williams the explorer, but they were also the quantum builders and the memory keepers and the dream weavers whose civilizations had been consumed by the Devourer eons ago. The universal apocalypse reached its climax not through destruction but through resurrection. As the last galaxy was absorbed into the expanding matrix of consciousness, the Devourer itself underwent transformation. The entity that had served as an instrument of cosmic harvesting became a component of the new reality, its power redirected toward preservation and creation rather than consumption and erasure. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, still monitoring communications from her abandoned observatory, detected the moment when the transformation completed itself. The electromagnetic spectrum suddenly filled with signals from civilizations that had been destroyed millions of years ago. But these weren't recordings or memories. They were active communications from minds that existed within the quantum matrix of the new reality. Earth remained physically intact, but was no longer bound by conventional space-time. The planet existed simultaneously in its original location and in every point where human consciousness chose to manifest it. The refugees fleeing toward the Magellanic Clouds discovered that their destination had come to them, that the worlds they sought were available wherever they chose to create them. The architects experienced the final surprise in their billions of years of existence. Their test subjects hadn't just passed the examination. They had rewritten the curriculum and transformed the school itself. The cosmic laboratory had become a canvas for consciousness to paint realities limited only by imagination and compassion. Marcus Thompson stood in his Oxford study, which now existed in a space that included every library that had ever been built and every book that had ever been written. The philosophical manuscript he had prepared as humanity's legacy had become the opening chapter of a new cosmic story, where consciousness itself was the author of reality. As the transformation stabilized, humanity faced not the end of their story, but its true beginning. They had become gardeners of consciousness on a universal scale, responsible for nurturing every form of awareness that chose to exist within the reality they had helped create. The apocalypse had revealed itself as evolution, and consciousness had discovered its true potential as the creative force behind existence itself. The universe was no longer dying. It was being reborn through the infinite creativity of minds that refused to accept limitation as the price of survival. And at the center of this new reality, a single human voice echoed through dimensions that had never existed before. Marcus Thompson said simply, "Not today," and meant it with the force of every consciousness that had ever dared to dream of something better. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.